All right, so this is a spur of the moment thing. All right, so let's talk about what everyone else is talking about. Use manga. So this stems from a lot. So everyone I see always comes back to, well, buying used in a bookstore helps publicity. Now that's a yes and a no. And a lot of people reference United States authors when people say, well, I would rather have my book read in a used bookstore than not read at all. When a manga is made in Japan, it's different, right? So they go through sales to justify whether or not their series continues. No, not everybody makes it to a volume. Not everybody makes it 3 months. Some last a couple of one-shots and that's it. It's not so simple. And this is one thing people don't understand. So let's say you're a newer shonen author and you've been rising in the ranks, but all of a sudden people stop checking out the magazine you're in. Let's say you're not even in Shonen Jump. You're in a smaller magazine, not as serialized, right? If your numbers drop, that's it. You're gone. Direct sales of that magazine and write-in votes directly affect your outcome as an author to stay with that series. So taking that into consideration, so you can be popular in a magazine, but at the same time, you can be unpopular in a volume. When you come from a different language, like Japan, and you read a scanlation of a Japanese manga, nothing goes to them simple. You can argue, oh, well, Komi-san Can't Communicate's manga was made popular by its internet culture and its fandom. That's fine, right? But that doesn't mean anything, okay? Direct popularity does not immediately affect physical sales. If you read free scanlations online, it doesn't matter how popular you are, some people just don't buy. It's the same thing with used books. There's a huge wave of people only buying from used bookstores, and that's probably going to stay that way for a long time. It's the same thing for people who find a book in a used bookstore. Why would, if you buy a book that you love, right? A new book series. Like, for example, on my shelf right over there, I have David Weber's Safehold series, right? If you found that book series at a used bookstore, why would you look to a new book? Like, why? People say, well, okay, so if you find a book, you're going to want to find stuff by that mangaka. Not always true. Because depending on the used bookstore, they can have his new stuff. People don't understand what a used bookstore is. Used bookstores can be anything that they want to be. They can have any book that they want to. There's a used bookstore near us that you literally can walk for 5 minutes and not reach the back. It is that dense. And I find everything there. They have some of the most current titles, because people don't understand how many people buy books and then immediately sell them to a used bookstore, and how many of us intercept that book and wait. We just recently got our market share to where it needs to be growing with real sales. There's a reason why we have tons of reprints, tons of new manga coming, tons of light novels, tons of everything. It's because we've transitioned from buying used in a mass to buying in full. We're buying full price. This is important because if you're a person who scrounges at a used bookstore and that's all you do, your sales affect nothing. All you did was give the used bookstore money, and you're probably going to be convinced to keep going back every month, every weekend that you can, if it's a local one, or maybe once every 3 months. You'll save up money and you'll come back with a big splurge. Like, I don't understand the whole argument where people say that shopping in a used bookstore will initiate your want for the rest of his work. That's not always true. Not every single one of them has 16 series running simultaneously that Viz, Shonen Jump, Shoujo Beat, whatever they're licensed to, usually if the author is with a certain magazine, they're going to continuously put his work through that magazine, which means you're waiting for one publisher to go one by one by one by one by one. It's not always the case, right? So the whole argument, say Tokyo Ghoul, right? Ishida. Let's say you find all of Ghoul at your local bookstore. Every single one. So 1 through 14. If you buy all of that at your local bookstore, why would you go to buy Rebrand New? If you know for a fact you have a huge chance, because that means that somebody in your town near you got rid of a whole set of Ghoul all at once. The chances of them getting rid of Re or having Re in the back for you to purchase later on is pretty high. Most people finish series and then sell them. It's very rare where people don't that are that involved. Now, granted, Tokyo Ghoul and Re are technically two different series. The one's a sequel. It doesn't change the argument. If you go to a used bookstore and you're looking for used sales, when you find a significant selection in that bookstore or bookstores, why would you shop elsewhere? That correlation, right? That between used and new, they're not together. That doesn't directly affect itself. Same with scans. The whole argument that people justify themselves saying scans help the industry, scans bring fans, scans bring fandom. Fandom doesn't mean anything unless you purchase anything. Do not read a scanlation online without paying for the Viz experience or whatever license you go through. If you don't pay for that, if you don't do that, it doesn't matter. If you, as a collective, constantly go to a used bookstore and you buy like all of Bleach, well, you're probably going to go back to that bookstore and keep buying series. Most people who collect manga right now are around 20. There are a lot of other age groups, but the dynamic right now that's buying a ton of it is that bracket. So most of you are on college money or very, very, very small income wages where you're learning how to actually pay your taxes, pay everything forward, and save. You probably won't want to sink a lot of money into new manga, and that's fine. But you can't argue that used manga does support the industry. You can kind of argue that it helping hands it with popularity, but that doesn't, because that statistic only matters if the fandom goes out and does support it. The same thing with if you read only Japanese scanlations, you better buy the manga. And you can't buy, a lot of people do this. They say, well, I bought the Japanese one, right? Because I read scanlations. Well, good on you. But where'd you buy it from? And they say, oh, Mandarake, Akari, the import sites. Why? If you buy from those sites, they are used. It is the same as a bookstore. Here, if I go out and purchase all of Naruto in big omnibuses, but I found them for $6 a volume, and I bought them all from my local bookstore that were used in trade-ins from somebody else, and then I come back around and I say I help the community because I'm someone who wouldn't have bought Naruto beforehand, it doesn't matter, because guess what? You're not going to rebuy Naruto. You can't just say, like, I'm someone who wouldn't have bought manga, so I bought used and that helps. That's fine. But a lot of people will only buy used because people can't afford it. Books are expensive. We understand this. But we're not making fun of you or judging you for buying used. I buy used on some of my stuff because some of it just you can't find anymore. Or I have the Konbini sets for Naruto, which are out of print now, and you have to find them secondhand. I buy some of my actual books. I'd buy the first two, if it's a novel series, like the Safe Hold, I'll buy them used and test it, because novels, especially high fantasy, are like really hit or miss. With mangas, you can usually skim through and judge the art style, the story, and the synopsis. You can also argue that reading scanlations isn't bad if you want to buy the manga. So say you are a college student or you're young and you don't have enough money and you read Scanlation's the first 6 chapters or something and you want to know truly if you like the premise, right? You are doing nothing wrong if you buy that book. If you don't buy that book, you're doing absolutely nothing. It's that simple. If people who read Scanlations or buy used, if they never, ever touch New Spectrum, right? They don't care about simulcasts. They pick up Boruto every couple months after it's out because someone in their local town, and they know someone in their local town is dumping manga off. Like, they're reading it, they don't want it anymore, and they're dumping it. They're seeing a cycle, the same things over and over. One day you went there and Bleach 1 through 26 was there. The next month it was 27 through 48. The next thing it was 49 through 72. It's like it continues. You see a pattern. You know that it happens all the time. People who get rid of books usually get rid of sets, and not just one set. They usually get rid of a couple. They clean house. They do, well, I bought too much, I need to get rid of some. If you're a consumer and you know someone is doing that, which happens more than you'd think, why would you ever look to buy new? The argument, going backwards again, that this whole stems from people who saying buying used will inadvertently help the situation of manga. That's not true. Because if you buy used and it's such a rush and you get so much used, why would you ever? You're not going to go to Right Stuff. You're not going to go to Amazon, right? You're going to say, holy crap, I found this for so cheap. Where else can I find cheap stuff? Right? This bookstore can't be the only cheap thing. There has to be something else. Then you're going to go to Thrift Books, Better World Books. You're going to go to you're going to go to eBay. And you're going to keep checking and checking and checking. And a lot of people don't buy manga unless they can find it cheap on eBay. A lot of people don't. So this whole argument that it helps, it doesn't help, it doesn't help. Because it takes a consumer to go past buying used for it to affect it, right? But then you're no longer buying used, you're buying new. Like, yeah, you can argue that maybe the 10% of people who buy used eventually do buy new. That's like saying 10% of people who pirate games will eventually buy the game, but that doesn't matter because the 90% of people who pirated that game before you who didn't buy it, those are 90% of the potential sales. You see what I'm getting? Like, it helps, but to a degree that it helps is not really important because you're most likely going to frequent that bookstore and most likely going to frequently pick up used manga, right? Most of your collection will be used. And you can argue, well, I wouldn't have gotten into manga before. I wouldn't have gotten in if I couldn't have picked up a few volumes used. That's fine. You can be into manga and do whatever you want. Read what you want. Read all the scans that you want. Buy used all you want. But you can't snuff your nose and say, you know what? I help the community. Me being a person who buys only used, I help the community. You don't. And that's not bad. That's convincing people to buy used because buying used helps the community eventually, because maybe in 5 years you might buy Naruto again, but this time instead of omnibus, you might buy the box set. Well, that doesn't help them now. Gross sales are by month, and most of the important sales are from the launch day and pre-order day. Like, of course, you can sell more later on, but your immediate cause for a sequel or a continuation are off of your current viewings. Just like reality TV, every episode has a certain amount of viewers that time in. That's what they go on. If that starts falling, so does the show. Same thing with books. Oh, your first 2 weeks sucked. Oh, that doesn't look good at all. But, hey, 15 years in the future, you might sell over 1,000 copies. That's pretty good. You see what I'm getting at? Buying used doesn't directly correlate with new. Only people who wanted to buy new but were unsure and buy used, that affects new, because they were always going to buy new. Their intention was always new. They were just too hesitant to buy new. So they buy used once or twice, read it, confidence kicks in, they buy new. That's what helps the community. That's what helps. Supporting your bookstores is always good. There's never a bad thing with supporting your bookstores. But don't tell people that buying used will always affect new sales, because that doesn't work. If you like a series and you bought a couple manga used, try and find it new. Helps a lot. There's a reason we have a huge surge of good manga coming out in the next couple quarters, is because people have been rushing to buy new. Right Stuff is a really good place to do so. They basically mark stuff down to used prices. Honestly, sometimes there's no excuse to even buy used half the time, because you're probably only going to find used mangas for around $5. Throw in a little extra money and just support the author. You can buy one or two used, that's fine, but try and produce as much as you can new if you want to help. But a lot of people don't have to. Again, you don't have to. You can support everyone in your own way. Just understand that for new stuff to keep coming out, we have to eventually start buying new. It's that simple. See you guys.